Hello and welcome everyone here for the healing stories. So I'm so excited to have Jennifer Lamson-LaPlume here with us today to share her story, how she kind of turned her life around and the tips and the insight she has for us to share as well. So I really appreciate you making time for us. Thank you so much, Jennifer.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I think like normally, but like we usually do, I would really invite you to share a little bit with us on what your life was actually like when you got to the point where you think, hey, I need some help here. I need to reach out. I can no longer do that alone. Maybe you can paint us a picture a little bit what that was actually like.
Yeah. So for me, a lot happened in the year 2012 for me. My youngest son was born, and it was like a very frantic. There were some complications. And when he was born afterwards, I was super stressed. And it was more stressed than I thought I should be. But eventually things seemed to get better. We made it through summertime. And then in October of that year, my husband and my brother and I were in a serious car accident. And at that point in my life, I say that's when my world flipped, literally, because it literally did flip. And that's when, kind of the wall I had built between the past and the present just fell apart. And I found myself getting angry. I found myself being stressed all the time. I would find myself reacting more to different things. Like I couldn't stand loud noise anymore. I was in a classroom teaching, and they built in an afternoon break for me because I just couldn't last the whole day anymore, which wasn't usual for me. And then I just, I finally realized that, there were a lot of times where I'd get upset with the kids, or something they would do would kind of trigger something in me where I wouldn't feel quite right. I'd feel scared, or I'd feel little. And so finally, I began therapy in June of 2013. And when I first started, I couldn't talk at all. I mean, like the initial getting to know you thing was fine, but once we started to talk about anything important, I was like, no, everything's fine. My childhood was great and life's good right now. It's just this one thing I've got some trouble with. And then there was, just me in silence for a while. And so I started really journaling. And it's something I had done before was journal, but I began journaling kind of every day. And really that helped me keep track of what was triggering me, what was bothering me. And then I finally got to the point where I could hand that over to my therapist, and she would read it, and then we'd talk about it. And then eventually I would read it to her, and then we'd talk about it. And then eventually we wouldn't necessarily have to use the journal because I'd already know what was in it. Yeah. I could talk about it. But I mean, there were times.
Yeah, that's a great tip for everyone who struggle with talking about things in therapy, to actually journal about this. Really,
yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah. And sometimes we even had a clipboard with paper there, so I could just write in the session if I found I couldn't talk. I just couldn't find that voice, but I could write it on paper, and then sometimes we just write back and forth. And that's how we started opening things up and slowly working on not only what was in the present, what was bothering me in the present, but what happened in the past. The traumas from the past would come in.
Yes, because it wasn't just the car accident. The car accident was kind of the final tip that broke it all. And so many childhood trauma survivors get all the way to adulthood, and it's almost like you're oblivious to actually, it's not there, is it? I didn't know what happened. I didn't, if anyone asked me, I said, like you, I had a great childhood.
Yeah, right. And that's what it was, until, eventually, bit by bit, my brain would give me a little bit more and a little bit more. that I would know. And I went during that time period, I would have to miss work some days because I was so anxious. And I remember one year, it was towards the beginning of the school year, and the kindergartners thought it was great to pull the fire alarm because they didn't know what it was. So one kid pulled it, and then that meant all the fire trucks came, and I was just like wanting to hide. In fact, the third time it happened that day, I did go, and everybody led my class out, and then I just went like, oh, I have a special task to do, and I had to go and separate myself from the group because I couldn't handle that much responsibility at that time. And then I remember the next day I woke up and I was so panicked that it was going to happen again that I just couldn't go to work. And it did happen that day. So I was glad that I didn't go to work and have to put myself through that. And eventually, those things would get easier. But in that time period, I couldn't do that. And if I drove by the spot of the car accident, I would slow down and I would, look both ways because it was a 4-way intersection. I'd look the other ways, make sure nothing was coming before I'd go through it. I wouldn't drive in the dark. I wouldn't walk in the dark, which had nothing to do with, the car accident. Seeing certain people walking down the street, like teenagers, I would get more and more scared. And so I would eventually was figuring out, oh, this doesn't have to do with now. This has to do with the past. And so there was a lot of things that was very debilitating in the beginning where I didn't want to go outside. I didn't want to go near like the mall where the kids are hanging out, or I didn't want to be outside after dark. So a lot of things were around that.
Did it feel it's really shrinking your life, isn't it? It makes it smaller, what you can do, and you're kind of confined to a space at home, and even that doesn't feel right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I worked with my therapist. I also went through a partial hospitalization program they mainly dealt with depression and anxiety. But it was a starting point for me. I went to what we call crisis stabilization units. And the first time I went was it wasn't a very good experience for me because I wasn't ready for that setting. But what it is just kind of a place where you can go for a respite, where there's some staff that will help you with your meds, help you get back into your routines, help you with your goals, take you to your appointments if you need, just kind of a step back from life. And then I tried actually going inpatient at the local psychiatric hospitals, the one in my state. And, it was okay, but not very helpful. But then I found a hospital that was specialized in complex PTSD and dissociative disorders. And that really gave me a lot of tools to help me grow and gain on my journey.
That's always something that I find really inspiring about you, that openness, or that willingness that you tried out things, like not just the conventional, what people say this is like trauma therapy. You tried other things as well, like the art therapy or the myofascial therapy. You were very open to trying that out. That's very inspirational.
Yeah, I mean, so it's it's all about finding what works, and everybody's what works is different. Some people will be like, I can never go inpatient, and I didn't really want to at first, but once I got to a place that really helped me, I was like, oh, this is what I needed. A couple months to just focus on learning strategies in a controlled environment. So even though it was super hard to be away from my family and to do those, it was really worth it for me to get those into my toolbox. And then later on, You mentioned the myofascial release. I tried Reiki and I tried myofascial release, and that in combination with cranial sacral. And I found that the myofascial release really helps with the body holding on to the trauma. It's really helping release that now. And it's kind of a message that I can send to my body during that. We don't need to hold on to that anymore. We can kind of let it go. And so that's been a really surprisingly wonderful experience for me.
Yeah. But this is because you're so open to try that. See? That
yeah.
I am very, these kind of things are holding you really inspiration for me to try the craniosacral therapy, by the way. This is something that I'm very hesitant to try out, the massages, anyone touching my body. But yeah, it's so beautiful to hear your story that you tried that and you were allowing yourself to actually relax in that moment and trust in. I guess it's about finding the right person too. And the right,
definitely about finding the right person.
Yes.
Yeah. And I knew this person as my physical therapist first. So it was easy to build into that relationship for the myofascial release. And, I think that's really important to know that sometimes it doesn't work for people and sometimes it does. And sometimes it's worth trying to see if it will help. That's another tool you can add to your toolkit. I know for me, yoga is something I hear people talk about all the time, and yoga is not for me, at least not yet. Like I cringe at the thought of yoga, and I have tried it at least once, and I made it through, but I'm like, it's not something I'm comfortable with right now putting in my toolbox. So everybody's healing journey is so individual.
It is. And I think, but it's part of the healing for us to learn to listen to our body. What feels right to me now? What is actually feeling nurturing and helping me to regulate my nervous system in this moment? 2-3 years down the track, it might be different tools that I use. But right now, this is what is helpful to trust that in ourselves, that I can make those decisions.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Because like that trial and error part, I tried the yoga, but it's not for me just yet. And that's progress too, because in the past, if I had tried that early on, I would have forced myself through every yoga session and been so uncomfortable, and it wouldn't have helped me. But now that I've tried it, when I'm further along, I can say, okay, I notice that it's making me more anxious. I'm not comfortable. I'm too self-conscious about it. I'll try again later if I want to, but that's not going in my toolbox right now. And it's okay for things not to work, and it's okay to try new things and find they work and find they don't work.
So true. I'm so glad you said that. Yeah. So often we push through some things like, but everyone else, especially I think in the group settings, like at the hospital where everyone's doing, if everyone else is doing it, it's like, why can I not do it? And you force yourself through, and
Yes. And I found, I had forced myself through a couple things in the hospital setting, and then I would just I'd have a panic attack, or I would run off crying afterwards, or some little thing would set me off that wouldn't normally afterwards. And I'd be like, okay, what happened? And it helps during those settings to learn, because I could reflect with somebody there. And then now I can carry that in at home. Okay, that little thing set me off, and it doesn't usually. What was happening before that that led up to that? And I think that's a really powerful thing, is that I can now look at myself and check in and say, okay, things don't seem quite right. What's going on right now? Do I have too much stuff that I'm doing? Am I not doing my self-care routines? Am I not journaling as much as I'd like to? Because sometimes I just want to live the normal life like everyone else. I don't think there really is a normal, but I just want to push myself to do what everybody else I see around me is doing, and that might not be the right thing for me. So I kind of take that as kind of check in with myself every day. Okay. How was today? What should I change for tomorrow? And I make a to-do list, and every day I make sure to include some self-care time, whether that be meditation, mindfulness, going out for a walk, or journaling. And then a big part for me is making sure I'm eating and hydrating, because those are super important. Yes. I've been learning that.
Yes. That is one of my signs when I know I am slipping, because I forget about that, the hydrate, the food, or it's either too much or not. I just, not there. Yeah. I think it's so beautiful that you have that. And I think for all parents, because you're a parent as well, I'm not a parent right now, but to create those moments where you have that time to self-reflect and to recharge yourself.
Yeah. And so fitting that in too, making sure that, especially when, it's vacation or summertime and everybody's home here, when do I do that? And making sure I look at what's coming up in the day and say, okay, I need at least this time to do that, is really important. And as well as routines and stuff, I'm looking at my journey, like where I was in 2012 to where I am in 2022. I remember when I first began, I was like, I won this battle of what I'm going against. There's this war going on inside me. I'm fighting. Yes. And then a few people introduced the word, like healing process, or working on yourself. And eventually journey sort of settled, was the one that I liked the most, because I was like, okay, yeah, I'm not at war with myself. I don't need to fight battles with myself. It's not what it's about. There's no like winning this war. It's kind of a journey I'm taking on, and the paths may twist and turn, and they might not go the right way, but eventually they're going to lead me in the best direction to where I want to go. So I think that was a reframing from being at war with myself and fighting and battling to using that more positive word of journey was really helpful to me.
Oh, that's beautiful. Isn't that powerful? That just that small reframe. You wouldn't think that just changing a few words and how you describe something could have a huge inner shift for how you approach things.
Yeah. And I went through a period with my art that I would do in the paintings, and I would just either collage pathways or paint some pathways, and that helped me see it more as a journey of walking along a path, and paths have twists and turns, or you can turn one way or another way, and eventually it'll lead you further though. So maybe you'll go on a loop occasionally, but it's still part of the journey, and I really like that language.
Yeah. And I love that you just left it at the language. You actually used that, you used the creativity to express that as well in your paintings. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Expresses so many. And poems. Your poems as well.
Yes. Poems helped a lot. That was part of my journaling and writing process, was just getting those thoughts and those feelings outside of me helped a lot than keeping them within. Like I always thought I had to keep all that stuff locked inside. And whether I let anybody see the poems or not, which I did let people see the poems, but that was my decision. You don't have to let anybody see what you write. It's important to express yourself in some way, whether it's through art or through music or writing or a combination. I think it's so important to let those feelings out. Yes. I know a lot of people, myself included, with trauma have trouble crying because crying was thought to be either unsafe or a sign of weakness, depending on culture, society, past, all of that can play into why you don't want to cry. And that was a thing that I learned, and I was taught how to cry as along my journey. I was like, we'll take 1 minute. Just sit somewhere quietly 1 minute and focus on that you want to cry. And then maybe for a minute, another time you are actually crying, and let yourself just cry for a minute. And then the next time, maybe you let yourself go for 2 minutes. I still find it hard to cry, and I still want to push it off, but I also know, okay, maybe I can set a time limit and just let myself feel the feelings, even if it's not crying. Maybe I will cry, but sometimes having that time limit of crying helps, because then I feel like it won't go on and on and on and last forever.
Yes.
Because I know I've definitely gotten the opposite. Instead of being afraid to cry, it's like crying and I never think it's going to end.
Yes,
so
that was my fear. Yeah, I thought there was so much sadness there. If I would ever start, I'll never be able to stop crying.
Yeah. So I think it was really helpful sometimes. Sometimes you do need to just let it out for an extended period of time. But sometimes I'm like, all I can handle is 5 minutes. I learned a strategy called containment, where you can either physically write down what's bothering you. It can be feelings, thoughts, images, impulses, and you can put it into a containment box, like a box that's just for that. Or you can do it visually. Like for me, I'm a big Harry Potter fan, and Harry Potter has Gringotts Bank, which is the safest place where any wizard can keep something, except maybe Hogwarts. That's what they say in the book, more or less. And so I have a whole thing that I walk through my brain about going to the bank and going down to the safes and putting it in. And something I was taught about feelings was, you don't want to put all of your feelings in containment, because if you put all of your feeling in containment, you're still not teaching yourself. So if, your sadness was like this big, then maybe you're going to put a lot in and keep like this much out.
Yes.
And deal with just that amount of sadness and put the rest away for another time. So containment, there's 4 steps to it. You express it, experience it, contain it, and then you retrieve it. So instead of stuffing it away, at some point in your life, you're going to go back and retrieve that. Maybe not that same day, maybe not the next day, maybe not that same month, but eventually it's going to come up and you'll be ready to work on that. So I really like that visualization strategy of, okay, I can put this away and I don't have to deal with it right now, but I will come back to it. And that promise that you're coming back to it kind of helps it not build and build and build.
Yes. And you got to stick to that promise. That's key too, that what we promise to ourselves, we have to actually, it's like, is it integrity? Is that the right word? The integrity towards yourself. I keep my towards myself. But
And some people say when they use containment, or when, you're doing something that and you make that promise, well, I'm never going to remember.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you might not remember. You might not say 3 days from now, oh yeah, I contained, this, but that feeling may come again. And then that reminds you, oh yeah, I contained some of that feeling. Maybe today I can keep a little more of that feeling out. Or I contained that impulse just last week, and now that impulse is back. So I'm going to write it on my agenda for therapy. That's another thing I do for therapy, is I usually write an agenda of the key things I want to make sure that I go over in therapy. If there was a big trigger, or if I have some event, like when I was traveling this summer, I wanted to make sure we talked about that. So that was on my agenda. How am I going to prepare myself for being with crowds, for sleeping in beds that aren't mine, when we're at the hotels, so all of that went into like therapy sessions to help me plan for traveling. And it works much better doing that.
Yeah. And I love that you were writing that. I always took a journal to therapy as well. It just really helps, because so otherwise, at the beginning when I didn't have that, I would leave the therapy session. Then I'm I wanted to ask this question. I wanted to say this, and I forgot. But then when you have it written down and you can show your therapist at the beginning of the sessions, this is kind of the things I want to talk about. It's likely to address it then. Because conscious does not want to talk about certain things, and you kind of actually forget as well.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And then I would also use that same agenda notebook to write any if my therapist gave me an assignment or a recommendation, or I came up with a recommendation of something I wanted to do for myself, I would also write that down so that, when I left there, it wasn't like, oh, what did I say I was going to work on? What did I want to do? Right
there. Same. Yeah, it's really powerful, I find. And it's reinforcing having it written there. I find that really helpful too. So again, like you said at the beginning, it's your toolbox. If written down things help you, then use it. Use it to your advantage. If that's not your style, maybe you want to draw pictures. It doesn't matter. Or sing it. Everyone's unique in their ways. But writing, that's beautiful.
And I think another thing that I've been learning a lot is that it's okay for your story to change. So when I first started therapy, I was focused solely on getting back to the person I was before. So, when I was a kid, all I wanted to be was a teacher. I went to college for teacher. I got my graduate degree in teaching. I taught for 14 years. And then I decided to stop and work on mental health and focus on family instead. And, I had so much guilt. Like I put so much effort into this, and now, that college degree is just going to waste because I'm not doing it anymore. Or if this is all I wanted to be, who am I now? And slowly over time, I realized, well, I didn't get rid of the teaching part of me. I just teach in different ways. I teach my kids, I teach crafts to people, I talk about my strategies with different people for healing. And I will teach people sometimes, what it means to be, to struggle with some mental health issues. And even if it doesn't even have to relate to like teaching, like I've found things like I like to do art therapy. I found I really like to paint, that's okay to incorporate that new part as well. And maybe there were some things that I was doing that I don't want to do anymore. And I can leave that behind. Like my story of who I am and who I want to be can evolve. And I don't have to get back to that who I was before because I can add on and make that who I was before better.
I like that. That's so beautiful. That you can evolve. Your self identity or who you are is evolving over time. Not to get too fixed on one identity. It's
right.
But it's fun. You did a whole university degree on this, isn't it? And you spent so much money and time and effort. It's like, do I really want to let this part of me go? But
I've come to terms. Sometimes I'm still sad and I still wish I were in that classroom environment. But at the same time, I'm like, no, actually, I really don't. That's not what I want to do anymore. I still want to teach people, but in different ways and different things. So I didn't lose that part of me. I'm just evolving it and changing it.
So the skill is still there that you can use in different areas, isn't it? That's beautiful. See, this is what I love. You're so open and you're exploring new ways, exploring ways on your healing journey and what is helpful to you, but also it's like, who do I want to become? There's possible for me. There's unlimitedness thinking, isn't it? It's like in the olden days, people had one job, and this is a job you have for the rest of the life. If you chose to be a plumber it is until the end, right? That was never even crossed someone's mind that you change career halfway through. But now some people change their careers like 3 times or 4 times in their life. It's allowing ourselves that space and to change and explore things out. That's beautiful. Thank you so much. You shared so much wisdom with us, so many insights, so many tips. It was really beautiful. Was there anything else you wanted to share? I don't want to cut you off. I just realized
no, I think that's really, what I had, it's those, I think my key things that I would say to people is, just remember it's a journey and it's not a one size fits all journey for each person. We may be linked by a diagnosis, but it doesn't mean we all have to go about our healing the same way, and that
Beautiful.
we can look at it not as being broken, but as evolving and changing and adding, improving.
Yeah, I love that. I love that so much. It's going to be one of my new favorite words, evolving.
I like that.
I like it. Thank you so much, Jennifer, for making the time for us here today. I really appreciate it. It was a beautiful journey. I can so resonate with your journey and what you shared. So thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. And thank you for having me.